information shared on the Rethink It podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. While Dr. Sande is a licensed medical provider, the content of this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical diagnosis, treatment, or advice specific to your individual health needs. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any decisions related to your health or medical care.
Welcome back to the Rethink It podcast. I'm so glad you guys are here today with me. I have been wanting to record this podcast for over 2 years. It is the gut-brain connection that we are going to be talking to you about today. And I know you guys, if you are listening to this podcast, have probably come across a blog or you've heard it in conversations that the gut has an influence on the brain and vice versa. Maybe you didn't know vice versa. I know I've talked about it in other podcasts where we talk about the connections. But today I am just tickled to bring you this interview that I did with Dr. Vohn Watts. There is arguably nobody more qualified to talk to you today about gut-brain connection. Vohn has been in the holistic and integrative space for over 20 years and comes from a family that is also highly engaged in this space. So you really have an amazing resource before you today, and I am just tickled that I had the opportunity to interview Vohn and share that with you today. So we talk about everything. We hopefully will round the edges on some of the information you have, and furthermore, we really engage in the practical things that you can do to support your gut and protect your brain. So it's a really great conversation. Vohn does currently now work in the space of formulating products to support health and also gut health, particularly gut health. And so I will be linking that in the show notes below. So where you can find his products, they are really great products. I do use them in my practice and I do recommend them. So without further ado, enjoy the podcast. Hey guys, I wanted to pop in interrupt our podcast to encourage you guys and let you guys know, if you didn't know, our book is available. Stephen's story about his struggle through Lyme disease. Our book, Kids Get Lyme Disease Too, One Boy's Journey of Trusting God Through Lyme Disease. It is available on all areas that you can get books, everything from Amazon to Barnes & Noble to everywhere in between. All the places that you pick up books, you can pick up our book. So please support us and get the word out. If you have a child that's struggling, it doesn't have to be Lyme. I know so many children who just feel weird because their health doesn't match that of their peers, and they feel isolated, they feel unseen, frustrated, and alone. This book is meant to encourage those children. It's meant to encourage you parents that you can get through it. It's meant to make you feel seen and heard and give you hope. So please pick up our book. Thank you so much for supporting our podcast and all the things that we do. You can see it's an ever emerging thing. I'm changing my studio. Today I'm wearing scrubs because this is the only time I've had to record, and I'm doing the best we can. And I appreciate that you guys are here with me at the root level, at the ground floor, as I'm trying to get information out to you guys that is valuable and hopefully life-changing, starting with the book. So pick up the book wherever you can pick up books, and thank you in advance for all your support. Dr. Vohn Watts, I'm so happy to have you here with us. We are going to have such a great conversation about some important information in the brain space, since this is the Rethink It podcast where we're focusing on brain health and longevity. We really want to talk about gut health and brain health and how it's so interconnected. But before we get going, would you just give the audience a little bit of your background? How did you get into this space? Why am I having you on here?
Sure. Yeah. I graduated, came out as a chiropractor and started working in like sports chiropractic, and very quickly, probably within the first year, kind of started moving over into functional medicine and started doing a lot of postgraduate training and in thyroid and metabolic health and detox, all of that, which in turn, gut health is a big part of that. And so I spent my time in practice, majority of patients working with patients that are dealing with thyroid issues and gut issues, and sold that practice back in 2019. After that, I went to work for a company called Cellcore Biosciences. I was in for a few years and took them in 3 years, 10x them, and
yes, you did.
helped them exit they exited to a private equity buyout afterwards. And then from there, I stayed on about another year and then decided it was time to move on to something new, and really just actually took some time off for about 4 months.
That's
And then,
nice.
yeah, it was. But I got bored real quick. So
Yeah, I bet.
actually ended up going, doTERRA found me, which is an essential oil company, recruited me to come be their vice president of nutritional education. So I spent the last year just traveling around educating on nutritional products and on the concept, which I developed about 10 years ago, called foundational wellness,
Yeah.
and implemented that there. I was there for about a year, and just this last month decided it was time to move on and really focus on a company that I founded and launched here about a year and a half ago, called Aegis Formulas, and which is a supplement company, which really trying to solve for a lot of the things that as a practitioner I wish I could have had, product wise. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I've come to now. I spent the last number of years, probably the last 5 years, training doctors and like health coaches, within the functional medicine space, but really teaching them as well a lot about detox, gut health, and really this concept. I initially called it foundational medicine, and I taught a lot of doctors that and never went and trademarked it. So someone else went and
I,
trademarked it.
yeah, I heard
Now there's
that.
even a podcast. So I'm like, it's fine. So I call it foundational wellness,
Yeah.
which is basically all the work you do prior to moving into treating any condition. Getting
That's right.
basically the terrain work. So
The
before a
terrain
farmer
work.
goes and throws and plants seeds, they get the field ready first, and that's what I count the seeds as functional medicine, and getting the field prepped and ready is foundational wellness.
Well, that's such a great way of presenting that. I try to tell my clients that often that, we're going to spend a good amount of time here building your foundation before we could even go and dig into the things that we know are the problem. We really need to build a solid foundation. And foundational wellness, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Have you always been, so in your professional career, you've always just been in the wellness space from chiropractics on, or did you do anything before
No,
chiropractic?
actually, I was in the Marine Corps many moons ago.
Wow.
Yeah, actually, as a Marine, I worked for the National Security Agency, the NSA,
Wow.
doing counterterrorism in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
Did that for 5 years, and then when I got out of that space, I actually went into the mortgage space. So really, my background, a lot of my real background prior to school was sales,
Wow.
and did really well in that space until 2008 when it crashed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, the company I worked for, they closed their doors nationwide
Yeah.
overnight. And
Overnight.
so, it was weird about a year and a half trying to figure out some other stuff I wanted to do, and nothing really quite sat. And finally, one day I was sitting in bed and I looked at my wife and I'm like, man, I should just go back to chiropractic school. And she's like, you should. I'm like, wait, really? Because at this time I have, I'm 31, 4 kids,
Wow.
4 little kids. And so that's quite the jump to just
That is
go
a big jump at
start
that age.
over. And
Yeah.
so we went, and I went and started over, and it was the right move. And this is the space I'm really passionate about, because for me, more than anything, I like to empower people. I'm at the space now, especially where I want to empower people to learn how to take care of their health on their own, and really how to prevent things down the road.
Right. Right.
So,
So, in your experience, let's talk about the gut and the brain. What connection do we have there?
oh, there's a major connection.
I'm
I
going to
mean,
let you have the floor. I always have something to say, so I'm going to try to
yeah,
shut my mouth
no,
and let you talk.
no, please, and interject with some stuff, because I'm as I hear thoughts, it takes me onto a whole nother path.
Right.
But I mean, it's an absolute connection. I mean, you create the majority of serotonin and dopamine in the gut before it crosses the blood-brain barrier to get to the brain. So if you don't have good gut health, just that alone, you can have, you're going to have lower neurotransmitters. And there's a lot of, old research out there. There's even more new research. As people are finding new research from research that was done back in the 20s and 30s that we've known about for a long
Wow.
time.
Shut up.
There was actually a study. I'd have to find the paper, but they did research. I want to say it was back in the 30s, maybe 40s, when we still had mental institutions, and we also had probably a lot more lax laws with how they
The ethics around what you
fix
can do to
with
your
patients.
inpatients. Yeah.
And and I'll have to find it and then send it to you when I can find it. But there was one that was fascinating. Um, they were taking these patients that were clinically insane, schizophrenic, or different issues. I don't remember the exact diagnoses these people had. I'd have to refer back to this. But anyways, people that were committed that had been there for years and had been clinically insane, and they started giving them fecal implants. So what they're
Like
doing
the
is they're
transplants like we have now
transplant,
today. Yeah.
where they were
Wow.
transplanting healthy microbiome back into the colon.
Uh-huh.
So not just the gut, but the whole GI tract. We'll
Right.
use that as an example.
Right.
And they were seeing massive changes. People
Total
that were
reversal.
clinically insane to complete reversals.
Yeah,
And so
I believe
there's
that.
a lot of this old research that it's kind of funny that it's coming back out. But if you actually look at the origins of it, this is stuff they knew about a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of got buried or
Yeah.
got ignored or whatever it might be.
When I had been about 2, 3 years out of anesthesia school, and I was suddenly taken a dive into the direction of natural health, and had decided I was going to look at the medical literature, what we had, on gut health from the gastroenterology standpoint. So like the Journal of Gastroenterology on this stuff. And there was data into the 80s that I came across that was electronically available on how much they already knew about the different the bacteria in the gut and the connection it had to every different organ system and the type of health conditions that were related to it. And it blew my mind, because if I asked a gastroenterologist about that I worked with, they had no idea. And I remember sitting there digesting that information, and like a ton of bricks, it hit me, and I was like, what if mental health is actually a food and digestion problem? And then I was like, I wonder if they've done any research on that. I was just like, what if that's the case? And as I've gone along, over the last 15 years, I've seen that. I mean, it is more complicated. I'm not trying to simplify mental health, but certainly I have seen major improvements in mental health as we correct the gut and the terrain. Embryologically, it totally makes sense, because before the first 12 weeks of life, those are one unified sheet of tissue, is the brain and the gut. They are unified. They don't differentiate until week 11 or 12 into the gut and then the brain. So embryologically, they're very similar and very closely connected. And we know we still have that connection with the vagus nerve. And yeah, it's a very big impact between.
Well, and there's a
the
reason
gut.
they call it, I mean, there's a lot of people here, they call it the second brain.
They do.
And I look at it this way as, well, it's like a second switchboard, right? The brain's the main switchboard, but what does the gut do? Well, we already talked about it. It helps with convert neurotransmitters, right? Create neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
It controls the majority of the inflammation in the body is controlled by the gut. The majority of your immune system is controlled by the gut. Like 20% of thyroid hormone converts in the gut, and you have other hormones, testosterone, estrogen, vitamin D, other hormones that also get converted in the gut. So microbiome is so impactful the brain, but also on so many other things out there.
The neuroendocrine system, the whole
Exactly.
neuroendocrine system.
Well, and you're familiar with like Dr. Andrew Wakefield.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, everybody looks at him and is
Poor guy
kind of
got
being one of those.
demonized.
Yeah, he got demonized, this anti-vax. And if you actually go back and look at his original work, when he was first looking at this, he was a gastroenterologist, right? That's what he was. And what he was simply saying, when he first came out, he was not anti-vax.
No.
When he first came out, he was simply saying, I am seeing a connection with kids that have got the MMR vaccination and their guts being completely screwed up afterwards. And those same kids now demonstrating with autism or autism spectrum type disorders, where they did not demonstrate any of those characteristics prior to that.
Right.
And what he was simply trying to point out was that, hey, maybe this vaccine is causing some gut issues that is creating some of these issues. And obviously that has, his where he's at now is has changed. But when he originally came out, that was simply
Yeah.
what he was talking about. It was,
Yeah.
hey,
He's
it's
calling for, like any other scientist, more
yeah,
research.
let's check
Should
out the
we?
gut. Like
Right.
it's really messing up the gut. I'm seeing this
Mm-hmm.
as a GI doc. I'm seeing this
Right.
with these we're healthy kids now, demonstrating differently and having all of them having messed up guts. So
Right.
he was one of the
100%.
first to draw that correlation, at least in that aspect. So
Yeah. Yeah. And the research has only expanded since. I mean, it's amazing. Well, let's talk about how does food affect our gut? How does that affect our brain?
oh my gosh, that is huge. Where do you want to start?
I know. Let's talk about seasonal eating. That's something I like to teach people. Why do we do that?
I remember back when, back even in school, when we were in biochemistry and the same professor for nutrition. And that's one thing he said. I mean, the best way to eat is obviously to eat the foods that are in season.
Mm-hmm.
They're in season for a reason.
That's right.
We need different things at different times of the year, right?
That's right.
More so, especially, your immune system need more support come fall, winter time. And it's interesting that certain foods grow better at that time than they do at other times, and other foods do not. And so seasonal is the best way you can eat. The hard part is, for most people, is there's a lot of research for that, because in America, you walk into a grocery store
You
and
got
you have
anything
everything.
anytime. Yeah.
And so you don't, for the average person to walk in and go, is this seasonal? Well, I don't know. Are bananas seasonal year round? For someone to think about, or is this seasonal? Is this, if it is, but it could be seasonal in the area where it was grown, like Hawaii or Central South America,
Yep.
which has a completely different seasons than we have here.
Right.
So yeah, no,
That's why we recommend eating local.
Yep.
Going to your farmer's market, finding a local farm that you can support. And that's local to you because you're also going to eat seasonal according to where you are. Like you were saying, in Hawaii, you have different seasons. Different things are available at different seasons. I think it's fascinating to me. I think it's great because the Lord put us in the garden. He surrounded us and we're not separate from the garden. I tell people all that time, like we try to do that in the modern world. We like put ourselves in these artificial homes and artificial cars and never go outside, and we create our own garden, and it's all artificially created. But we're really designed to be in the garden,
right.
and to honor that is honoring our bodies. There are some links, and I can probably put them in the show notes that will show you that has the reference to like what's seasonal where and when and all that jazz. So we'll provide those resources in the show notes. But I think it's really important. The thing that shows up for me when I do a lot of testing is like the terrain gets really stuck. So when you don't have the diversity of food and you constantly eat the same thing over and over because it's easy, you end up getting poor short chain fatty acids. You just don't, your gut diversity becomes non-diverse, and you get the same dysbiosis and stuck patterns of bacteria, which then now we're getting all the downstream effects of our neurotransmitters in our brain. So
Right.
eating diversely and seasonally is very powerful.
Well, it is, and what people don't understand, like I have patients come in and they say, "Oh, I ran all these food allergy tests," and I look at them. The first question I ask is, "Did you have any kind of allergy to any of these foods prior, like growing up in your teens, your 20s, or is this kind of a relatively new thing within the last number of years, 5, 10 years, whatever it might be?" And most everybody says, "Oh no, I used to be able to eat this up, but I just I've got an allergy now," and that's usually a telltale sign of your gut dysfunction. What people don't understand is, and I was one of those very rare thyroid docs, especially at that time, because you had all these books coming out about gluten and gluten, and I never bought in on the gluten bandwagon. I still am not. The gluten is what triggers it, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense because these same people were eating gluten before and it didn't trigger. And as you start backing things up and really trying to get to really the root cause, which foods are most heavily sprayed with pesticides? Most famously known glyphosate for most people.
Yes.
It's foods with gluten are most heavily sprayed with pesticides.
Correct.
And what we have found and what the research actually shows is that it's the glyphosate that actually goes in and actually causes those tight junctions to open.
That's right.
So causing the leaky gut.
Correct.
So then when we're creatures of habit and we eat the same foods over and over and over, not only are we having a less diverse, microbiome,
Right.
but now what happens is those foods start seeping in where they don't belong because you have leaky gut, and the body sees it enough, it eventually creates
Antibodies.
an antibody for it, or it can get to that point where it creates an antibody, but it begins with like sensitivities because it doesn't belong there, so it's trying to tell your body that something's going on, and the reality of it is you fix that gut lining and suddenly these food sensitivities no longer are there. And
That's so true.
that's why I tell my patients, save the money, save the $500-$600 for a food sensitivity test, and let's just fix your gut, and you should be fine to eat just about anything.
Yeah. Yeah. The glyphosate is a really big thing, and that's in everything. And with the wheat, I wrote a blog about this like 15 years ago. I was like, this is crazy. The fact that they take the wheat, they harvest the wheat, and then they spray the wheat with Roundup to desiccate it faster so they can increase the rate of production.
Right.
So not only is it necessarily sprayed while it's still growing, but it's also sprayed specifically to dry it after it's harvested. So then it's double sprayed. And then we've got the ground saturated with Roundup that then produces more Roundup laden foods.
Well, think about what that does. So we spray the Roundup so that when a pest comes and eats on the plant, it eats it, it kills the pest, right? Insect. But now we're putting that inside of our body. What do you think that's doing to your microbiome?
Right.
You know what I mean? So if it's killing bugs, it's killing bugs. I mean, and there's all sorts of, I'm not going to get into, the lawsuits, but there has been a lot of lawsuits and billions of dollars that have been awarded because of these things coming out, which, as you see, most European countries have completely banned it.
Oh, it's completely banned. And when I go, I do eat relatively gluten low or ancient grain type, sourdough type foods. But when I go to the EU, I don't find that I have to do that so badly. Like I can eat whatever's at the restaurant and I'm just fine. I don't get brain fog. I don't get the things because of that strict policy the EU has against Roundup specifically. Other pesticides, I think atrazine is also kind of on the banned list in the EU, which is so high here.
Yeah.
It's incredible and endocrine disrupting. So yeah, the food is very different in different countries.
And you hear people that say, "Oh, I went over to Italy for a week and I ate so much bread and I actually lost weight while I was on vacation."
Yeah.
I have a sister.
Went down.
Yeah, I have a sister that has got thyroid issues, and gluten is definitely a trigger for her. But I mean, it's more that she's had some other stuff too. But I mean, bread, she just stays away from breads altogether because it just doesn't do well for her. And they moved over last summer to Marbella in Spain, a beautiful coastal town in Spain. And she was there for a few weeks, and she's let me know, like, oh my gosh, I can eat the bread here. I'm regular, because this is a person who was like 4 or 5 times a week using the restroom. And now she's like regular, and she's eating foods that she could never eat here before. And so it really does show you the difference of the foods you put in your body and how that affects your gut and your digestion.
Yeah.
And which turn is going to affect all these things that the gut affects as well.
All right. Including our bread. Yeah. And I had this conversation one time with a colleague who's, of course, we're anesthesia colleagues, so he's just poo-pooing all the holistic things. But he's like, nutrient deficiency. We didn't have that, 50 years ago. I said, we also had healthy, regenerative farms with natural, non-pesticide laden soil. So the soil depletion leads to depleted foods. That's the problem. And so that's another piece that the pesticides affect is the health of our soil, which then affects the nutrient density of our food.
They actually pulled some spinach, right? So spinach does have has vitamin C in it. And they pulled spinach off, like in a grocery store. They went and grabbed spinach, tested it for the content of vitamin C, and they knew that it lost a little bit as they picked it and it was going through the process before it was available for sale. But when they actually pulled it off the shelf, I just read this like a month ago, maybe it's 3 weeks ago, they pulled it off the shelf and they tested spinach for vitamin C content. What percent would you guess was in there of the vitamin C content?
5, 10?
0% vitamin C. Zero. So I tell people this. I'm like, it's not just about that. We farm differently. We used to farm, this field is corn one year, next year it's soybeans,
Right.
and we'd switch crops, or they'd farm this field, and then next year afterwards they'd burn the corn stalks, leave that field alone and not farm on it, and then they'd farm it the year after, allowing
Correct.
the nutrients to replenish the soil.
Right.
And now it's corn every year, same fields every time, and
Yeah.
we're spraying all these pesticides.
Yep.
The nutrients just aren't in there. And so unless
Right.
you're really eating really good organic, then even eating organic,
Yeah.
they've
Not perfect.
it's
not a
not
perfect solution.
they've still found traces of pesticides, on foods that from grocery stores that preach that. And so I tell people, really, I mean, your best bet for really organic is either growing your own fruits and vegetables or buying local from the farmers market. That is your best
Yep.
your best bet to be as close as you can to eating organics.
Eating organic, yeah.
And it goes back to my entire concept behind foundational wellness is really, with the exception of like some genetic, but I mean, for somebody, a regular healthy person doesn't have any genetic issues or any things they've been growing up with, suddenly is starting to get sick or ill or having autoimmune conditions or whatever it might be. The whole premise of foundational wellness is this, that the human body is a self-healing organism
It is.
if your organs are functioning the way they're designed to function.
Correct.
And so, in my opinion, there's 3 things that cause organ dysfunction. And it is nutrient deficiency. And we know that if you don't have enough vitamin C, you can get scurvy. If you don't have enough vitamin D, there's rickets. I mean, there's actual
Right.
diseases associated to all the different vitamin and mineral
Right.
deficiencies. And so, nutrient deficiency
Yep.
or toxic burden.
Toxic
Meaning
burden.
you've got mold, parasites, pesticides, heavy metals, emotional toxins. We know that stress
Yep.
will cause your adrenals to not function right,
That's right.
properly.
Right.
So it's not just physical toxins, but trauma, stress, emotional toxins as well, or a combination of both.
Yeah.
And so that's where we do that work at the beginning is
Yeah.
let's make sure that you're not depleted in any kind of vitamin, mineral, nutrient, and then let's make sure that we're detoxing your body from any of these potential harmful things that you may have been exposed to.
Yeah.
So that's the nutrient part is
It's
it's a cornerstone of that concept.
It's cornerstone, yeah. Yeah, I show people the 3 bubbles. I call them the toxicity, deficiencies, and stress, and I do this Venn diagram, they overlap, and that's the toxins can lead to deficiencies. Deficiencies can build toxins, which is a good segue, by the way, to glutathione, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then stress can lead to deficiencies, lead to accumulation of toxins, and they just overlap each other. And so it's something, and we have to address them from all the standpoints, identify where the major deficiencies are or toxins are, and that's the foundation of my research when I go into supporting a client, is looking at those 3 bubbles, like which one is really the most out of whack. Is it the stress?
Right.
Or are you eating garbage? And then we build from there. So let's talk about glutathione, because that's our big piece.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Tudka too, but let's start with glutathione, because glutathione helps switch that cycle off of toxicity leading to all these deficiencies and immune imbalance and more toxicity, because glutathione downregulates in a toxic system. So
Yeah.
what is glutathione?
So, from a basic standpoint, it's amino acids. It's basically just a substance made from amino acids. Like I think it's like glycine and cysteine and glutamic acid. But it's basically something that your body already produces. It's produced by the liver, and it's really helps support the liver's natural ability to detox, because your body is made to filter the crud out. So like when I talk about like diet, and it's hard to be perfect, right? Be 100% all of this. And so I try to, like, if you're the 80-20 rule, you try to eat healthy 80% of the time. If you go out to dinner or here and there every once in a while, that 20%, if your body and your organs are functioning the way they're supposed to, they're designed to
Heal.
find that heal
Self-healing.
and find that crud and detox naturally. The problem is in America, we're flip-flopped. We're 80% crappy food and 20% of the time we eat good. And so the body just can't keep up. So with the glutathione, I mean, it really helps not only with helping the liver to detox, but it's involved in a lot of other things like tissue building and repair, making chemicals, proteins that are needed in the body. It really helps the immune system function. I mean, there's a lot of things that glutathione don't do aside from just helping detoxification. And as a thyroid doctor, that's huge too, because 60% of your thyroid hormone gets converted in the liver.
Oh, wow.
So if you don't have, I mean, 60% of T4 converts to T3 in the liver.
Right.
You know, and then 20% in the gut, and then 20% in
And
other
the
peripheral
adrenals
tissues.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, but the big majority is right there in the liver. So when I run a thyroid panel, I mean, I run a comprehensive panel anyways, but any doctor who runs a thyroid panel should always be running a liver panel as well.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
To see what the state of the liver is.
Right.
Because they could have, like I've seen a lot of patients where they've been on thyroid meds for a number of years, and then you look at their liver and their thyroid, and you're like, okay, your TSH is okay, it's not where it needs to be, and your T4 is normal, but your T3 is low. Well, the body, 97% or 93% of the hormone that the thyroid creates is T4. So 93% of the hormone you create has to be converted. Only 7% is T3 or a form of T3. And so most of it you have to convert. And so if it's showing that your TSH numbers are off and your T4 is normal, but your T3 is low.
Yeah, you're not converting.
What it's telling you is you more than likely have a
liver problem. Yeah.
Not a thyroid problem. And you get that liver fixed,
right.
and you get that liver working and support that liver, then suddenly the thyroid just starts self-regulating and it starts working again. So huge liver. And then not only that, hormones as well, you know, there's a lot of different things that happen in the liver. Funny enough, the same biochemistry professor I had years ago, I remember before going into boards, he would tell us, if you don't know the answer
it's liver.
And liver is an option, you choose liver. That's what he said all the time. He's like, he couldn't hammer it home enough how important the liver is and crucial the liver. I mean, there's two organs that I work on the most, more than anything else, it's liver and gut.
Liver and gut, 100%. Yeah. And the liver, I mean, we miss it. One of the things I was going to say is that, you know, in our world, we end up with, because our toxic burden is so high, because we're 80-20 in the wrong direction, there is this process the body does where it down regulates the production of glutathione because of the toxic load. And so that's where supporting glutathione comes in, right? I mean, why does it do that? It's just burdened by enzymatic demand, or
why
does the liver down regulate glutathione when we need it more? When we have more toxins.
But there could be a number of reasons for that too, though, because I mean, we have, like, if you look at our for example, our nano glutathione with premethylated B vitamins in there. But the methylation process is a big aspect in there too, and some of these same people have methylation issues,
right.
Which can also affect glutathione production. So, there's a number of reasons. That's one of those things. Like, there's a number of reasons.
Simple answer. You can't give me a simple answer. Why not?
Toxic burden, especially when your body's overstressed by the body as well, can cause
the disappointing thing and the challenging thing is that the studies show that like the average 10-year-old, like there's about something like 60% of the average 10-year-olds have early signs of fatty liver disease. So what are those kids set up for going forward into adulthood with their toxic load, with their hormone balance, with all those things? I mean, if the liver is involved in our thyroid and hormone production, and you start having fatty liver at the age of 10,
you're going to have thyroid issues. You're going to have type 2 diabetes before you're graduating high school.
And that's what we see.
That's what we see. And we see a lot of it. And people are like, why are we seeing this, rise in, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? You're like, ultra processed foods.
Yeah, because that's exactly right. I was going to say, where's our fatty liver coming from when they're 10 years old? Sugar, toxins, pesticides, processed foods.
Yeah, and it's wild when you really step back and look at our diet and what we're programmed to think. Oh, we eat breakfast, we eat lunch, we eat dinner, we eat certain things at certain times. And then you look at some of the breakfast foods, the first thing you come out, a muffin, That's okay. So that's just a fancy way of saying cake.
That's right.
I mean, literally, it's a piece of
Literally.
cake in a different
Yeah.
form.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then bagels, muffins, toast, pancakes.
Pancakes.
It's
Yeah.
all cereals. I mean,
Yeah.
you're just flooding them with not only
Sugar
the sugar, but the ultra processed
process.
food aspect of it as well, which has other things that cause all sorts of problems. But that's the real deal, and
That's
it's easy. The people don't understand. It's actually not hard to reverse,
right.
especially type 2 diabetes. That's one of the easiest. I loved when I had a type 2 diabetes patient come to my office. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, I easy patient for once. I'm like, 4 months, and you'll be back to normal. 4 months. You
Four
follow this
months
program, 4 months, and like clockwork, within 4 months, they
for changing the diet, for
change the
supporting
diet,
the liver.
lifestyle, and then you're going in and we're addressing nutrient deficiencies, and then we're pushing out anything that they may have been exposed to. And like I said, I usually use like assessment forms to kind of help dial into what things they could potentially be exposed to toxin wise, and then from there order panels to confirm those toxins. And when we're done, we rerun those panels to ensure the toxins are out. There's no more mold or heavy metals or whatever it might be that they have going on.
Yep.
And it's not hard.
Yeah.
Just teaching people how to eat right,
Yeah.
not diet. I don't believe in diets.
Yeah.
There's very few instances where I believe in diet, and that's usually for very specific health issues they're dealing with, and that's usually for a
Short
time
term.
period while
A,
we're
a
going.
restricted period of time.
And then once
Yeah.
that's done, then I get them right back onto a normal, what I consider a normal, healthy diet.
Normal healthy diet. Yeah. Normal healthy, low pesticide, organic, 80 break,
Fats and
breaking
proteins,
20.
less
Yeah.
sugars.
Yeah.
Um,
The opposite of the pyramid.
the exact opposite of the
Yeah.
pyramid,
Yeah.
which is crazy that's even still online anywhere. And
I know,
they
but
should
it
be.
is. I'm pretty sure it's still taught in schools.
It is absolutely horrible. And then we
Yeah.
wonder why we have all these issues.
Yeah.
Even as well with the brain issues. You talk about the gut-brain connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
These people with these horrible diets, and then as they age, then their cholesterol levels are up, which that's a whole conversation on its own.
Yes, it
On
is.
but then they put them
Men
on
is
these,
different than women.
yeah, then they put people on these cholesterol-lowering medications, which
We are going to have it on a podcast. I have a pharmacist coming on talking about this. It's a bit of a
Good.
requested topic from
that is a
many
great
angles.
one to
Yeah.
talk about. And I can't
Yeah.
wait to hear it because I
Yes.
talk to patients. I warn patients about being on cholesterol medication long term,
Yeah.
and
But
how
Google
it
it. Google it.
Go
Ask
Google.
AI what they say. AI says statins are the best. All the studies are showing it. And you're like, but we're not thinking. We are just not thinking.
No, not
But
at all.
yeah. Lower, yeah. Well, instead if we were adjusting the body's system of why are we getting dyslipidemic? Why are we what's going on? Ask the why behind the why behind the why to find out what's going on instead of band-aiding the problem and causing others in turn.
In the process.
Yeah, exactly. On that actually topic, let's talk about Tudka because I love Tudka. It's a staple in my practice. I use it a lot. So I'm excited about your Tudka that just came out, Tudka Max. Let's talk about Tudka. What is it?
So Tutka is an acronym, and I don't even try. I don't even attempt to. It's like a 20 letter. It's like tauroursodeoxycholic acid, or
There you go.
I probably butchered it, so I just say
Yeah.
Tutka.
Yeah.
But it's well known for being having liver protective properties. Really helps in detoxifying the liver, improving bile flow, and helping to regenerate liver
Yeah.
cells. It is actually also used to combat cholestasis, like when you have like that bile flow blockage, and even fatty liver disease, which
Correct.
is an amazing product. I mean, me personally, obviously, I own a supplement company, so I don't take every single product I have. I take products that I feel I need, or products that are like my maintenance things I take daily.
Sure. Yep.
Tudka is one of those.
Yep.
Because it's not, and it really helps with bile, but it does so much more than that. I can
Yes.
go in, like, let's see, I can list off a few different things.
Let's list off a few things, especially don't forget the brain. Don't forget the
Yep. I
brain.
want liver support and detoxification, gut health and intestinal lining repair. So what it does is it goes in and it reduces the inflammation in the gut lining, which also makes it, when we do that, also it really benefits, when we're dealing with leaky gut or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, all of which are definitely gut related, all of which I have had great success with patients with any of those type of issues. Completely, I always hate to use the word with autoimmunity. I'll say gone in remission. Basically, their panels are normal and they don't have any symptoms. So whatever you want to call that, they feel great and their labs prove they're great with that.
Yeah.
What else? Mitochondrial and cellular protection as well.
Mitochondrial and
That's a
cellular
huge one.
protection. That is so
Yeah.
important.
So what it does is it has a cytoprotective agent because Tudka helps protect mitochondria from oxidative stress and toxins. So that's a big part of that.
Huge.
So when you have that, then obviously it's very helpful for neurodegenerative diseases and other things like that. But gallbladder and digestive health, obviously, because Tudka
Huge.
improves that bile flow in order to digest fats, which can also, for those that are more prone to gallstones, this is a great product to be on to help prevent having any kind of gallstones in the future. But
Yes.
the big one with the brain, I left this one for last. The big one with the brain and nervous system support is that it's been shown to reduce inflammation in the brain. It protects neurons. It improves cognitive
Huge.
function.
Huge.
And it's been shown, in studies, actually, if you go into PubMed and you look up Tudka and brain or any kind of neurodegenerative type disease, some of the ones you'll see is that it's shown in studies real good benefits for conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, as well as like multiple sclerosis. And really, it helps with that a lot by reducing that oxidative stress and supporting the brain and detoxification.
That's huge.
It's an amazing product. That's
Yes.
a daily staple for me, just because
Yeah.
it has so many amazing health benefits. That's just one of those products I take daily,
100%.
along with a really good, vitamin and mineral type. Because, like I said, even as healthy as you think you are,
You
you're
still
very
live in a toxic world. I quote this book that was it's published like in 2000. Book's called Detoxify or Die. It's like you're like one of the first ones that really was, raising the flag on, hey, we got a problem here. And she said, high-tech pollution needs high-tech solutions. She was pointing out the fact that if you go to the polar ice caps and you drill 3 miles down, that's how far you have to go down before you pick a sample that is clean. This is in 2000. That is
wow.
clean and does not have pollution from the globe. 3 miles down in the polar ice caps.
What do they say recently too? Even with babies that are being born, they're finding these babies have like what over like these placentas,
80,000
But
toxins in their umbilical cord.
yes,
Most of
tons
which
of
they don't have
chemicals.
names for. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're even getting all these toxins that whatever the mom's been exposed to
100%.
is right
Yep.
going to the babies. So our babies are born toxic now. And then
That's right.
look at the increase in C-section births.
You're right.
And we know that when a baby comes through the vaginal canal and they're getting that microbiome from the mom, and when they don't come through the canal, they're not getting that
Right.
that microbiome exposure,
Right.
which is already, once again, I
Setting
can't
them up
stress how
for-
important it is. I can't stress how important the microbiome is just generally in general health, period.
And the microbiome is not just in the gut. Like it's in the mouth and the eyes and the nose and the skin. Like it's the entire
Everywhere.
terrain of your body. Yeah. So
And
that's
it really
Yeah.
does play a pivotal role in helping to fight off other things. Like
right.
I have somebody I knew that had a pink eye once and went into the doctor, and the doctor misdiagnosed it as bacterial instead of viral and put on an antibiotic, which killed the bacteria
Around
the
there.
eye, which was the only thing fighting off the virus, keeping it at bay, so it wasn't really bad. So when they gave him that antibiotic, it actually killed that microbiome, which was a little bit of a layer of protection, and then that pink eye just went bananas.
Oh, wow.
And so you think microbiome, yes, the gut, but it's in all of our organs.
All of our organ systems, yeah. Yeah, and that's why we recommend, when you're in a holistic space, you're going to hear, we really recommend you stay as natural as possible. Why do we not want to take a Tylenol or Motrin? Why don't we take those drugs? What is it about those drugs? Well, we learned, we knew Tylenol kills, really damages the liver, but there's a recent study came out, actually Motrin has a similar damaging effect to the liver, but from a different perspective. We know that Tylenol blocks N-acetylcysteine, which helps detoxify the liver, so it's a direct blocker of that enzyme, but Motrin actually destroys the gut and the microbiome of the liver, which damages the liver from that perspective. So you can't, those are over-the-counter drugs. We're talking about over-the-counter.
I'm I don't know how controversial you want me to be, but I have an uncle who he retired, probably here within the last probably 7-8 years, and he was a pharmacist for about 40 years. He at a certain point was head pharmacist of over like 1,000 pharmacies nationwide. So I mean,
oh wow,
he is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to any kind of medication and pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
And it's funny as he's been into his retirement. I mean, he's nothing super crazy to do, so he researches a lot.
Yeah, you can't help it.
No, it just and even sometimes for me, I'm like, you know what? I could spend 30 minutes trying to figure this out, but I bet you he is already. Sometimes I pick up the phone, I'm like, hey, do you have any research that you've already found that I could just go to? Because chances are he has, and he made a statement to me. This was a statement he said: all drugs create a problem worse than the problem it's fixing. And this is coming from a pharmacist that now there's a time and a place, and I have patients
100%.
that are on things. I'm like, hey, you're going to have to maintain all that because we need to maintain you on that while we're trying to keep you stable with whatever condition you're dealing with, while we're trying to naturally,
Fix
get your body to
root
fix
cause.
it. And then you can hopefully taper off. But
Yeah, no.
usually by that point too, we're also dealing with a number of side effects from that
Yeah,
med that they've been on.
100%.
So
Yeah, it's
always a risk.
I always tell people, like, every drug that I have ever seen leads to some sort of at least nutritional deficiency. Let's just say metformin, number one drug for type 2 diabetes, leads to B12 deficiency. Lipitor, number one drug for cholesterol lowering, leads to CoQ10 deficiency. We go on and on and on. All the drugs lead to some degree of deficiency, and we know those three bubbles: toxicity, deficiency, and stress. We're going to cause a problem because we end up leading to a deficiency in the nutrient that then cascades into the whole body's imbalance, right? And so, yeah, for sure, that's why we recommend natural solutions. And I'm just going to ask you a few questions because you have some experience with the natural company doTERRA. So why would that? I feel like that's a great segue because those are solutions we can use naturally instead of using a prescribed medication. I know you're not supposed to say that, but here we are. I mean, what are ways we can support the body naturally using natural solutions? Let's just start with, we have already talked about Tudka. We've already talked about liver health. Let's talk about some, like, what if we have indigestion? What do we do?
Well, it just kind of depends on the cause. I mean, I would get a lot of, actually, one of the very first things I'd get, one of the first questions I'd ask any of my thyroid patients, actually any of my patients, period, was do you have acid reflux or any kind of stomach issues? Because where's the first, I mean, other than it starts breaking down, there's obviously enzymes in your mouth that start breaking food down, but where's the majority of the food, or even, let's say not food, let's say supplements or anything else you take, where does it break down in the stomach, right? And if you don't have
proper amount
of acid in there, you'll have acid reflux. It's not too much acid.
Yeah.
So then you get, which is all backwards.
Opposite of what you're taught.
Because then they put you on this proton pump inhibitor, which really all it does is it quells the symptom of feeling acid reflux. But what it really does is make the problem even worse, because then if you go off that medicine,
Yep.
your acid levels are even lower.
Right.
So the very first thing I ever do is I look right there and like, how is our stomach? You know, and then with that, a simple solution, the HCl pepsin, all that I have.
Right.
Most patients can do it 7 to 10 days and it's back to normal.
Back to normal. Yep.
I've had one patient, had a few patients, they'd had to do it twice. I had one patient, she was starting to make me nervous because when you've had success with treating something
hundreds of times and you're like yeah,
every time, and
yeah.
then you get that one patient and they're like, she's come back in after the second time and she's like, I still have a problem. And I'm like, do it one more time.
Yeah.
And here she was, she's been on like acid reflux medication for like 30 years.
Yeah.
So
I got a couple of those.
I'm like,
I can't come off. I'm like, yes, you can.
So it just, what it did was it took more time for her. So she had to do it a third time. And then she didn't ruin my perfect record, luckily. I'm like, not the perfect record. But no, it was such a simple solution. But there's a lot of them. You have essential oils that can be very, I did work for doTERRA for a year. But even looking at, there's all sorts of different products. It depends on what you're trying to do.
Right. Yeah.
But there is usually a natural solution. I mean, you think about this. We have Chinese medicine, and I'm trained in Chinese medicine as well, acupuncture. And they've been using this for over 5,000 years. Same with Ayurvedic medicine.
Yes.
So, what do you think we were doing before medicine was invented here 150 years ago?
Petroleum-based drugs were available.
Right. They were using, everything was natural-based. And even a lot of the medications that we have, they're natural
synthesized
based
forms.
And then they synthesize them in a lab because in order to patent it, it can't be natural. It has to be synthetic.
Right.
So it's
yep.
I think people, they discount natural medicine thinking that medicine is the only way. And it's like, well, we've been on this planet for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And medicine isn't even 150 years old.
Yeah, right.
So these things work, and depending on what it is you're dealing with, there's a lot of different types of solutions.
Yeah. Well, knowing how significant the gut is to the brain function and health, I just want to pick your brain on one other common problem that I think, especially in the South, but it's just everybody deals with allergies, seasonal allergies, right? And the number one drug people are going to grab is an antihistamine, Claritin. Do you know what happens to our gut with that?
With those drugs specifically?
Yeah.
I'll be candid, I don't.
They actually cause the same thing that Pepcid and PPIs do. So they lowers your stomach acid. So then the whole cascade, it totally changes the pH of the gut the same way. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but
no, you're fine. Yeah. The thing is when I'm talking with patients, there's a lot of different things that can impact and can affect stomach levels and stomach acid, as well as any other thing. But for me, it just gets down to what's the problem, and let's see how we can fix that and get you back to normal.
So what are some things you would say for that allergy situation? I just want to get some practical things so we can protect our gut, then protect our brain, and not reach for Claritin.
Well, yeah, there's are you
there's
talking
a million things, so I just want you to throw some out there.
Yeah, are you talking about specific supplements or
supplements, essential oils? Pick something.
Let's see. Well, here's one. We actually are rolling out a new product. It'll come out, I believe, in June.
Oh, good.
And it's a peptide.
Excellent.
It's an allergy peptide that has been actually clinically proven to wipe out allergies pretty quickly, and it's in the supplement form. So we're rolling out this new form of product. Our first one will roll out. It's an anti-anxiety.
Yay!
They come in forms like strip, like a Listerine strip.
Like a Listerine strip.
Put on your tongue, sticks right to the roof of your mouth, so you get it absorbs straight into the buccal absorptions right in the mouth. So you're bypassing the stomach and gut.
Yep.
And so you get a much greater absorption rate. But those are some of the other ones. What is the one? doTERRA actually has a really good oil for that.
Tri-Ease.
Yes, Tri-Ease. That is the one. That is everybody loves that one.
Lemon, lavender, and peppermint. That's the magic combination.
That's the go-to. And luckily they have that one blended into like an allergy support formula already.
In the capsules. So if you're coming straight out of this world of taking capsules, you can just grab those capsules. I just grab lavender and dab it, and it usually does the trick.
But I even look at it even more. I just didn't do a lot of, I didn't treat a lot of those kind of things. I would, like, while I was treating the
Treating
patient,
the other issues, yeah.
we would, if somebody was dealing with some acute type things, we'd use some natural stuff to help,
Right,
support that. But I usually went right back to, well, why are you having these allergies to begin with?
right.
And usually that pointed right back to gut.
Mold and gut.
Yep, mold, toxins, but gut dysfunction and what's going on in the gut, whether it's
That's right.
dysbiosis or mold or parasites or whatever it might be,
That's right.
and really go into actually fixing the gut. So to be perfectly candid, I didn't use a whole lot of those kind of products in
Natural solutions.
practice. Natural, I call them firefighters, where it's
That's
more of
exactly
like,
what they are.
little
Yeah.
firefighters. To put it out, unless it was somebody that was really dealing with something, and I didn't want them to be miserable while we were treating. So,
Right.
but I always went back to, well, let's fix this problem so it's not a problem
That's
later.
right. Yeah, one of the things I do in my practice, because I bring a lot of people come in with sort of a semi-conventional mindset, and the very first appointment, I give them a list of things I want them to have, and I'm like, you're not going to use all of these right away, but right now these are the products we're working on for usually your gut, and these are your firefighters, and I want you to have these firefighters because as we unearth, clean up, clear out biofilm, get rid of mold, you may have an acute flare, and I want you to reach for an essential oil or this instead of your Sudafed, which I know you're going to want to grab.
Yeah, I liked the essential oil one for allergies. Allergies was a big one that I liked
Yeah.
for that. But, you also look at it, it's like, okay, well, let's go back to the gut connection with that. Why, you look at, there's certain bacteria in the gut that help break down histamines, which for those that don't know, that's a chemical involved in, allergic reactions. So if you have dysbiosis, which means you have an imbalance in your microbiome, like you don't have a good microbiome going on, dysbiosis can actually impair that histamine breakdown.
Yes, it can.
So usually a lot of, that's one of the big keys of why people are having allergies to begin with is that they're dealing with some major dysbiosis.
That's right.
But also, inflammation is
100%.
a huge part as well. So right back to the gut, if
That
you're dealing with chronic,
TH1, TH2 imbalance.
you're dealing with that chronic inflammation,
Yeah.
that basically primes that immune system for an exaggerated allergic response when
That's right.
you're inflamed. So
Right.
there's a number of things, but they all kind of point right back down
right back to the gut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so true. Well, I love that. Yeah. So ultimately what you're saying is if we have some brain fog and we have some neurodegenerative things or neurodevelopmental things or just acute neurologic issues,
Even
one of
ADD,
the foundational-
ADHD, any of those kind of things, they can all come back
we're
right back
all
to the
looking
gut.
at the gut.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
see a big correlation even when you start to work with kids that have ADHD, especially. I didn't personally work with autistic kids because that's like its own thing. And I know doctors, I have buddies that specialize in that, and that's what they do, and they're very good at it. But working with some just more on the lower aspect, like ADD or ADHD.
Spectrum, a little bit of pandas.
Yeah, mostly just the ADD kids, a little more hyperactive. They don't, the personality, everything else is pretty normal. They're hyperactive, and it's amazing when you just start fixing their gut and change their diet away from the, ultra processed foods and away from the dyes that have been also clinically proven to impact. Like I had one patient, her mom knew that yellow 5, like if she gave her mac and cheese, that kid was going to be bouncing off the walls afterwards.
Yep.
Because for whatever, for her, that's how it reacted. So
Yeah.
you get the diet balance, and then you get back in there and start working on that gut.
Yep.
Fix that dysbiosis.
You know the kicker. So the scientist in me, when I have a son who's ADHD or was really profoundly ADHD, and I medicated him because I was medically trained, PA, then anesthesia. And so that was just all I knew until I had to know something else. And thank the Lord I do now. But so when I did make that break into natural health, I relooked at the drugs and I looked at the Vyvanse that my son was on. And I went all the way down the 50-page insert. At the very bottom is the inactive ingredients. You know what was in there? It was like Blue Lake 40. Like, no joke, there were like 3 different dyes in the drug. They say it's for tracing purposes. But I'm sitting there thinking, well, that explains a lot. You take the kid, you give him the drug, he calms down, and what happens at 3 o'clock when the drug wears off? The effects of the dye is still there, and they literally, it's not just because the drug's wearing off and it's a rebound. It's the drugs are wearing off and you've poisoned them with the thing that makes them neurologically crazy. And so, yeah, then of course you want it. That's positive reinforcement for taking the drug the next day.
Yeah, and I don't profess to be the I'm a doctor and obviously a scientist in the aspect of researching, but I don't profess to be this super brilliant scientist who develops drugs and things like this. But it seems highly unlikely that these brilliant scientists don't know that those ingredients are doing what they do.
Yeah.
And it seems almost like the drug is feeding.
You wonder, don't you?
Almost like a
kind of
feedback.
wonder. Yeah.
It's like creating their own feedback loop.
Create their own feedback loop because there's billions of dollars in the market.
But hey, I'm super, I don't get super into politics. I used to when I was younger, and the older I got, I'm just like, ugh, I couldn't care less about politics anymore.
You can't control those things.
You can't, but the one thing that I am excited about, regardless of what people's politics are, is I'm really excited about RFK and all the things he's already announced, things that they're going to start studying. A lot of these things we're talking about, the dyes and all these different things. Because we know the studies are there. They've already pulled some. Yeah. And we know the studies are there. It's just they've been ignored. They've just been ignored. And so hopefully we have a CDC and a FDA kind of going forward where they're taking the latest and greatest research and going, hey, this
not
looks
burying half of it.
And saying, hey, we need to do something about this.
Yeah.
we can remove, there's natural dyes. That's what we used before.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Canadian Fruit Loops and look at U.S. Fruit Loops.
Yeah.
One is very bright colors. The other one's not as bright.
Right.
One has no dyes in it. The other is all natural dyes. Or, I mean, one has dyes in it was all natural dyes.
Right.
But they want so they can do it. They're doing it currently.
Yeah, they're doing it in other countries.
Choose not to do it here.
Yeah, I remember coming across an article in the UK. There was this bakery that imported the confetti sprinkles from the US to make, like, I guess, cupcakes or something like that. And they got shut down by the UK because they imported them from the US and they didn't pass the UK standards. They had dyes in them that weren't allowed in the UK. And I was just like, whoa, why is this not making headline news in the US? Why are we, I mean.
So I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that, we start doing, and not just going and banning stuff just to ban stuff, but I mean, going and doing the real research and seeing what does the research say. And if there are certain chemicals and things that are currently in our foods that are harmful.
Yes.
Well, we should be banning them.
Right.
There's
what does the research say, and not if it just aligns with our current goals.
Right.
The research independent of our personal, political, or corporate goals. That's the thing. The unbiased research. That's what science should be, but unfortunately.
Yeah, well, hopefully we get back to that because, I mean, there's a reason why we make up, something like 7% of the world population, and we consume 67% of the pharmaceuticals. Make that math work.
That's incredible. I'd never heard that statistic before.
Yeah. My dad will be 86 this month. Still lives by himself, drives, good health, doesn't take any medication. And every time anybody go into a doctor, the very first thing they do, they'd hand him a blank piece of paper and they'd say, write down all the meds you're on. Because usually it's a long list.
Right.
And he just looks at it and goes, I take Advil every once in a while if I have some pain, but I don't take medication. They're like, wait, what? Because they just assume, if their doctor's doing the right job, they've got you on 5 or 6 meds.
That's right.
And unfortunately, that's the opposite of where we want to be.
That's exactly right. It's interesting though, where I still work in anesthesia, so I see the spectrum of ages. I don't do peds anymore, but I did. And what was interesting to me was that my octogenarians, my 80-year-olds and older, actually seem somewhat healthier than my 40-year-olds.
I believe it.
And they like are, I don't know, they're just more independent. They have less drugs on their list for the most part, with the exception of a few. For the most part, if they're coming in for something elective, a hernia or something like that, these people have less drugs than our 40-year-old people. And I'm just stunned by that. Like they're, what is going on? Our generational toxins that we could like inherit and give off to our next generation.
I think it's the food. I think it's the food, and I'll tell you why. Because I look at my dad's diet. Like I can't think ever in my life watch my dad eat fast food.
Wow.
And not because he just like, he's like, I want real meat and potatoes. I want real food. I want home cooked meal. Like he's just always been a home cooked meal kind of guy. I don't want to go eat it unless he's going to like a nicer restaurant or something.
Sure.
But he wants home cooked. They're that generation.
That's right.
They're not the generation. They don't like fast food. They like home cooked meals. And if you look at what do they eat, that's one of the things I tell people when it comes to diet. You want to hear my little diet? Like I try to make it simple because for me, I would rather have compliance than somebody compliant for a month or two and then they fall off. I want them to be like, hey, it's not a diet, it's a diet change, right? And so I make it super simple. If it grows on the ground, in the ground, swims or flies, you're good to go. If it comes out of a bottle, package, or can, try to stay away from it.
That's perfect.
And then and even with those things, you try to eat things that are antibiotic-free, hormone-free, and organic of those things, right? And then when it comes to your plate, it's simple. Your plate should look, they go, how should I eat, doc? Well, and I'd always tell them, there's a nice steak restaurant in Kansas City where I will practice. Like, this steak restaurant, yeah, it's, like what, $60, $70 plate? Yeah. What does your plate look like when you go there? Well, about half the plate is either like asparagus or it's like a vegetable medley or a salad. And then we have a really good piece of quality meat. And then the starch or carb is just like a little tiny, a little bit. So I'm like, so the majority of your plate, half your plate is vegetables, and then the other half, the other quarter is a really good healthy piece of meat, fat, protein. Yeah. And then you can still have carbs and stuff. We still need those, but just it's in the proportions.
That's right.
So if you eat that way, it's simple. Now you don't have to think about, am I counting my macros? Am I counting this? Like, just make it simple. Look at that's what your plate should look like. Your plate should look like you just spent $60 for your plate. That's right. And if it looks like that, and you're following the rule of grows on the ground, in the ground, swims or flies, then for most, you do that, you're going to do better than 80% of the
80% of the population. Yes, that's so true. I think that's a good place to end it. Even though we didn't spend a ton on the brain, I think we get the point because the gut is where it starts. So thank you so much for bringing in such practical information. Thanks for giving me a person to dialogue with on this and just
absolutely,
reinforcing things for the people who are listening that already hear this from me. I'm glad somebody else is saying it. But for those who have never heard it, I'm hoping this is simplified, demystified, and made it more practical for you. So thanks again for joining us. I'm so glad you came on.
Thank you.